So I was, the entire time during Candles of Joy and Sorrow, I was listening very clearly, very carefully, but also thinking about whether to share or not. And I think I want to share with y'all, so I'm going to do it. This week marks two important anniversaries of my life. One, Kristen and I will have been married 13 years. And it's also the 6th anniversary of my mother's death this week. So I'm holding both of those. And then on a slightly lighter but still joyful note, my wife got 5 first-place ribbons at the Montgomery County Agricultural Fair for her baking. So, and 6 second-place ribbons, and 2 third-place ribbons, but and 1 fourth-place ribbon, but that's okay. She's a really good baker. Yeah. Some of you had her cookies and caramels last week, actually. Okay, I wanted to share that before we got started. So when I was 18, I moved off to live on my own for the first time in my life. In fact, the first time I had ever spent really more than a couple weeks away from my parents, or more than a couple weeks away from the home I grew up in on Moffers Street in Old West Austin, Texas. I was so excited. I literally didn't stop smiling for the entire 3-hour drive down to Houston, where I was about to begin my first year at the University of Houston, and we're in the tie today. See, you can't see it, but it has little UHs on it. Now, this is August in Texas. I should say the AC in my car did not work. I had the windows rolled down, but that just means 102-degree air is flowing over you instead of sitting still. It's not a big improvement. But anyway, I was driving 65 the whole way down. Now, was I also nervous and a little scared? Like, yes, of course, lots of things. There are many complex emotions. As Walt Whitman has famously said, I contain multitudes. So partly my excitement and my trepidation was at leaving what I had known. But more so, it was about what I was going towards, the new, the scary, the reality of potential. And I think, it's always dangerous to say this as a preacher, but I'm going to, I think this is a universal experience. Maybe it's not college, maybe you weren't 18, but at some point in your life, you left familiar surroundings for something new. It may have even been that the world changed around you and you were the one who stayed in place. We've all been having a lot of that feeling these last few years, I think. But however it happened, you suddenly found yourself in a new, perhaps challenging, certainly unfamiliar place in life. And as I said, all of us have found ourselves in some version of this position these last few years, I think. The world has changed around us. A pandemic of proportions we haven't seen in more than a century has changed how we work, how we shop, how we interact with one another, even with our family and friends. It's changed our economy and our daily routines, our relationships, so much more. Many of those changes have been bad, of course. We've had deaths, illnesses, lost jobs, missed time together. We could name 100 other things, I'm sure. And a few of the changes have been good, weirdly, or at least sort of neutral. Many people have had the chance to work from home more, which I guess can be a blessing or a curse, depending on your particular situation. We've had more time together, perhaps, with those in our household, though having spent a lot of time with my family of 5, I know that is also a mixed blessing. One of the best things to come out of this pandemic time for me was reconnecting with some college friends, to bring it back to the University of Houston for a second. A group of 4 of us have Zoomed just a handful of times, once every few months, connecting in ways that we hadn't in 2 decades. In fact, we'd never connected in that way virtually. And that, of course, despite the fact that we are in 2 different states here in the U.S., and one of us is in Korea. So one night we all shared, just randomly talking, that we all had food preparing in our fridges, because clearly we have entered the pickling and fermentation stage of our lives. since literally all four of us had some form of cabbage prepping. Kimchi, sauerkraut, and in my case, curtido, which is a Central American, kind of a coleslaw without the mayo. Anyway, it's good. I digress. It's been really wonderful, though, to see these guys I hadn't seen in years. And it's really sad to me in a way, but also joyful that it took a pandemic for us to make it happen. I think still, these 3 years on, we're left feeling like we need to find a new sense of normal, a new feeling of home. Not the one that we left behind in March 2020, I don't think. A new sense of who we are and what our lives are and will be. And maybe that involves some intentional, not just unintentional change. There are people out there right now thinking about making their first visit to this congregation, whether online or in person here. We've had people already make their first visits here from the comfort of their own homes and communities near and far. You have been challenged, and I have been challenged now, to rethink what it means to be the Unitarian Universalist Society of Mill Creek. Not a building or even a place, though those can be important, but a community that goes beyond just being in the same room, but can encompass members around the world. So in this, my first sermon here, I of course want to say everything. And I have enough experience now as a pastor to know that this is a common new preacher mistake. Trying to say 5 sermons instead of 1. We'll have many sermons and meetings and pastoral notes for me to share with you, some more of those ideas. And it's a daunting prospect to give a first sermon to a new congregation. Even though I've done it a few times now, I'm still a little daunted. How do I introduce myself to you and say something meaningful and set the tone for my ministry and welcome, well, I'm supposed to welcome myself, I guess, which is a really strange thing to say. And as someone who has done a lot of interim and contract ministry, I've gotten used to this. I give these every year or two, it seems, but it never gets that much easier. One of my mentors in ministry, the Reverend John Burens, who was president of the Unitarian Universalist Association from 1993 to 2001, he told me once that we should turn this on its head, this notion. That it's not my job as your new ministers to welcome myself here. It's this community's job to welcome me, as it is our calling to welcome newcomers constantly into our community, to engage them in what we do and who we are, to invite them to bring the gifts and perspectives they have to change us, not them to change so they can be okay here. It's a good reminder to me, it's not my job as a newcomer to welcome myself, even as the minister. I'm supposed to be welcomed. And rest assured, you're doing great on that front. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that you need to do different. I was shown my office. I have a key. I've been contacted by many people and a few groups for meetings. A number of you I've already met in my office or via phone calls or at least emails. And a special thank you to all of those who have sent me postcards to introduce yourself. I've gotten quite a few, though I'm always welcoming more. Don't feel like it's too late now. It is never too late to send me a postcard, in fact. I am trying to reply to all of them, and I'm about halfway through replying to the ones I've got. So, yeah, go for it. A friend of mine, a colleague, introduced me to that way to introduce, to get to know a congregation. Because a postcard or a note is just enough time for you to share a little bit about me, but enough for me to want to know more, right? I don't need a life story. I just want to know a little bit about each of you. We'll get to the life story part later, to learn the basics and little details you've shared. I also really like postcards just because it's fascinating to see what people pick out and send to you. Some of them are clearly postcards you've had for a long time, and some of them, I think a couple people went out and bought one specifically for me, which I appreciate too. So yes, my first visit here was a couple months ago to interview and tour the grounds. And I thought of a previous congregation I ministered to. They had a sign actually on their driveway up. One sign said, "Enter." The next sign said, "Rejoice." And the third one said, "Come in," as the words of our hymn today say. Sort of like one of those old Burma shave signs, right? You had to read it in parts. These simple words, though, enter, rejoice, and come in, contain so much of what we're striving to do. To enter into community, to rejoice, in fact, to feel joy and sorrow and all the things in between, and come in. Not just enter, but really come in, be in. Not just dip one's toe in, but jump right in. Because we are a community that invites your whole self. And for some people, it takes a little while to bring their whole selves here, and that's fine. Some people are here 100% from day one, and that's great too. It's our job to help people, whether they are people who do a cannonball into the deep end or who need to walk into the shallow 1 inch at a time. So enter, rejoice, and come in, friends. It's been central to our congregations to help people find a sense of community, a sense of home, and a sense of belonging. We welcome people into this special community. We want them to come, want them to join in what we are doing, and to bring themselves fully, to feel like they can bring themselves fully. We don't ask you to leave part of you behind. It is a core part of our faith, of our religious tradition, and of this congregation to be welcoming, and I mean that in so many senses. This is a welcoming congregation, which, if you don't know, is the name for the Unitarian Universalist program, which congregations do in order to make sure we are friendly to people of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. We attempt to be accessible to those who need to use wheelchairs, to give another example. We try to make our space and our gatherings as accessible as possible. We want to be a place where people feel like they belong, like they can belong, and we're committed to doing the work it takes to do that. So to be welcoming, inclusive, friendly, this is Unitarian Universalism, or the beginning of it, at least. In coming weeks, we'll explore more of what it means to be a UU community, especially this UU community as I come to know it, and how each of us fits into that. We'll go into who we are and who we want to be as a congregation. So friends, enter, rejoice, and come in. And then prepare yourself to welcome the next folks to enter and rejoice and come in. May we invite them into what we are doing, welcome what they bring into who we are. More than ever, our world needs the power of welcoming community, the power that brings people together to make a better world for us and for all who come after us. May it be so.